friends, welcome back. This is episode 110. This week we're going to talk about compounded stress. I'm going to let Marvin take this.
So this has kind of come up with a couple of cases this last week. And so compounded stress. So this is my best way to describe this is if you or somebody you know thinks, well, I've never been well since XYZ. Okay. The examples I have this week are after surgeries. Okay. One was a tumor removal and the other one was a hernia repair. And normally those surgeries may not be entirely benign, but usually people have a full recovery, right? They recover 100%. They don't have any problems. These folks are struggling and it may not look like it's related to the surgery. So they're struggling with things like memory, things like fatigue, digestion changes, systemic inflammation, and pain. Memory is usually at the top of the list. Like people are having trouble with like critical thinking at work, right? Like they can do all the automated stuff that they've done 1,000 times that they can do in their sleep. They have no trouble doing that. But when they're asked a question or there's a critical thinking, it's like their mind goes blank. They can't make that leap. So we've been trying to figure out, well, what's contributing, right? So physically, they look like they've recovered, right? They've recovered from the surgeries. Physically, they're doing fine. But it's this memory, it's this fatigue, it's this systemic inflammation and pain that's catching up. And that's why they started coming. These two cases started coming to see me. So when we think about stress, right, we've talked about stress and how stress affects our physiology. If we are looking at the context, right, like I often ask folks, how do you rate your stress on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 is, I don't worry about a lot of things, and 10, you worry, you have anxiety, feelings of anxiousness to the point where it's overwhelming and it keeps you from doing things. Well, if we are experiencing that chronic stress, that chronic 8, right, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 stress on a regular basis, and we may feel like we're doing things, we're like making do. You're doing what you need to at work. You're doing okay with your family. You're doing okay on that front. But your stress levels are a little on the higher end. And then you experience a physical stressor, right? A major physical stress. Surgeries are major physical stressors. So even a minor surgery can turn into a larger issue with the context of where you were at prior to surgery, right? So you think your body's undergoing this physical stressor, and that creates more stress on top of your chronic stress. You've compounded that situation and created this perfect storm of increased cortisol, increase the neurochemicals, but also our hormones, like cortisol, our stress hormone, our adrenaline, that are now acting even more on our physiology, so that it's making healing look different. Right. Yeah. So even though that surgical wound may have healed and the surgeons released you and said it looks great, but all this, ongoing memory, that fatigue, that's your body's trying to not just get you back to where you were pre-surgery, but before you were just maintaining, right? You didn't maybe have a lot of reserves. And so now we've got this larger physical stressor. So now we're like 15 out of 10 on the scale, and all of a sudden it's wiped all of your reserves. And so people are like, oh, I've never been well since XYZ event, right? And if we look at that context, oftentimes if, there was chronic stress prior to that XYZ event, it compounds how our body's able to respond, which with our physical health, which is often not very well. We start to see those chronic symptoms, come up.
So it's like you're in a deficit.
You're depleted. You are in a deficit. And then you're trying to work out of a deficit, right? You're trying to repair out of that deficit, and it just doesn't work well. It's hard to make something out of nothing. It's hard for our body to make something out of nothing.
So how do you go from a deficit like that? Like, what are the secret ingredients, right? To go from a deficit, because you can't just go back to baseline, right? Like, you got to go back to storage and right?
So if your baseline was already like an 8 out of 10, gauge of stress, right? We need a lot more to get back there, right? So if the body is, so part of it is you address the symptoms. Okay, so in this particular case, so like I said, her main issues were like the memory, the fatigue, the gut health, and the inflammation. Okay, so we're going to work our way backwards to get to that root cause. So we're going to start with the gut health, and we're going to start with the systemic inflammation, because that's what's creating the pain, the joint issues. So we address that systemic inflammation with things like systemic enzymes to reduce the circulating antibodies that are creating that inflammation. Then that to address that symptom, then to go the next step up, where's that inflammation coming from? It's probably coming from the gut. So even with a clean diet that she has prior to surgery, those clean foods are creating a reaction, because so it's like she had a little bit of leaky gut going into this that she suspected. I didn't see her before this, but so she suspected leaky gut. That increase of cortisol made that leaky gut worse. So it increases that systemic inflammation. So then we've got to heal the gut, right? The root cause of the worsening of the leaky gut is that stress. So then we go that next step up and begin to support the adrenals, right? We do that with our B vitamins. In some cases, in her particular case, we do things like glandulars, because glandulars are desiccated or dried adrenal glands from animals, because that gives your adrenals a break, right? One, your body recognizes the hormones in that capsule. So your body says, oh, okay, I don't have to make as much, so it lowers the demand.
Right.
As it lowers the demand, you can begin to replete and rebuild those reserves, so we can get to a place where, you're getting closer to baseline. So,
but that's only if the stress is created from a physical stress situation.
If it's compounded by a physical stress situation.
Because if they don't stress predominantly, not all stress, some stress is created by exercise, physical stress, right? Surgery, physical stress. But majority of stress is psychological. It's perceived. All right. It's the perception of the world that's creating a psychological stress.
Right.
So if that's not dealt with, you're just kind of battling it's like you're trying to go uphill while pulling a heavy weight. Like, you got to cut the weight to make progress up the hill.
Exactly. You're going to have this constant back and forth instead of just moving forward, right? To actually be better than you were before this physical stressor. You've got to address the emotional stress, the mental stress as well. Because you have to think, if you're putting in this context, right? This person, these folks have started already at a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Right.
And so you don't want to get back to that baseline. You've got to, we're actually trying to work at getting better, but you've got to address the symptoms leading up to that root cause. But I think it's important to be able to see that connection, right? To see how well one surgery or one physical, like even an illness, right? We still see this with COVID, even to a certain extent, of having a physical stressor like a surgery and illness that has made things worse, has made your overall health worse. Yeah. So the more that folks will slow down and begin to address the emotional stress, the faster they will resolve the symptoms of physical and the emotional symptoms. And people are not even emotional, but like the neuro symptoms, right? That fatigue and that memory, people recognize that because it's hard for them to function in their job, hard for them to function with their family or their kid, help with their kids with homework. And so if you're addressing the thoughts that are creating that original stress on top of now the symptoms that are exhibited from the physical stressors, we can, move health forward much quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
It's interesting that this compounded stress idea, I guess.
Yeah.
So we've been working a lot on my health, and I really feel like we moved to a place where I'm feeling good. A lot high energy levels for me. I'm not like a hyper person, so my brain like was very like calm.
Yeah.
Right. Like it didn't have a lot of thoughts all the time. It was just kind of calm. Right. And recently I did Murph on Memorial Day. So Murph is a 1 mile run with 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and another mile run.
Yeah.
Just it's hot, it's very taxing on the body. Like it took me 61 minutes. So that's 61 minutes of high intensity work.
Yes.
Right. Which I kind of knew would put me in the hole.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a lot. So I did that on Monday. Leading up to Monday, I was like physically and psychologically really good.
Yeah.
Monday I did that. That night I didn't sleep good because a storm came in and all the animals were out.
Yeah.
So I got 5 hours of sleep.
Okay.
Right. That put me in the hole even more. So I noticed this week because when you have the contrast of feeling really good.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're aware of what not feeling good feels like. I was like, oh, like I can see like this amount of stress, this lack of sleep, it's pulled me back into this like kind of deficit place where the energy's low, my mental health, like there's just a more of negative thought spin on things. Is that like an example of like,
that's a perfect example. Yes. Yeah. Because that physical stressor, it can be anything, right? Like I use the example of an illness and a surgery because that's what I had come in this week. But yeah, even just more of a physical demand like that, our body recognizes it the same way, right? Like our body doesn't discriminate. It's like, hey, I know what stress is. This is stress. Yeah. And so, it creates this pathway to respond to stress, but that does can deplete us if we didn't have a very like large cushion or a lot of reserves, right? And along the same lines, like the further you went throughout the week, the more maybe tired, maybe physically, but also mentally. So then, the thought process have a tendency to be maybe a little bit more negative. It can be a very similar thing that the more that we're depleted, the harder it is to make better decisions about our health. Right. So sometimes people will notice this at the end of the day. If they've had a stressful day at work, by the end of the day, you're tired, you're exhausted. And you're like, you know what, whatever, I'm hungry, whatever I can put my hands on is what I'm going to eat. Yeah. And sometimes you, will even get a little bit more, you'll recognize a little bit more sort of that negative self-talk or that negative thought process because we're a little bit more depleted. So you don't have that cushion, right? Or that buffer to be like, oh no, I can slow down and step back and see that perspective change. So it's along the same lines. It's as we maneuver through those stressors, that they can compound, and if we don't take time to reset and rebuild those reserves, we just keep pushing through and pushing through, we get an even the greater deficit, and then you're just kind of depleted across the board, emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Which is crazy to think. Like, I used to live like that, like day after week after month, for years, from 2013 until 2019.
That's a long time.
Yes,
it's a long time.
And I think that's one thing I love. Both of us now have these Garmins, right? Garminwatches, and they have body batteries.
That's my new favorite feature.
That thing does not lie, because I forgot about the part that, like, so that was Monday, Memorial Day. So I had like a hard cider that night. And then I think maybe Wednesday night. Well, that impacts your stress score. So then Garmin's like griping at me, like my body battery's low. Right? Because it's 0 to 100 for you guys that don't have it. And you want to charge up to 100 every night when you sleep. Well, of course, I bottomed out because of that workout. So pulled my body battery down to the like 10 or below, which is Garmin does not like for you to do that.
I don't want to see less than 15.
Then I didn't sleep well, so I only charged to a 30.
Oh,
right. And then if you add alcohol into that, like, it will knock off points as well. So I spent several days with only a body battery charge of 30 to 40.
Right.
So then, like, this is such an instant feedback of like, this is what you're doing. This is why you feel that way. It measures the stress alcohol puts on your body, the stress exercise puts on your body, the stress emotional, because I guess it reads my HRV and my heart rate.
It does.
So it will tell on you, people, if you have one of these. Like, if you're living in stress, because you can start correlating it. Like, I feel it. Like, that body battery's low. I was like,
that's exactly it. You start to see, okay, if you're coming from that place, that deficit, like several days or weeks, and your body battery is not getting, I mean, you're in the 30s or 40s, but you're trying to do your regular routine. It's just not there, right? And that's where people will start to notice, oh I'm fatigued, my brain's, I mean, it's not working like I expect it to. You introduced me to this tool, this body battery, and I really appreciate it, because it does help you recognize or maybe validate how you're feeling with where your body actually is. Right. So for me, it kind of gave me permission of like, okay, you know what? I'm not feeling it. I don't have to push myself. Like, it's better for me not to push through and be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of a break and we'll revisit it later. Instead of just feeling like you're constantly like stuck in mud and you're like, no, I have to do this. I have to do this. And you keep pushing and pushing, but you're just continuing to deplete yourself. So, I like to use this as that tool to check in, and it makes you more aware of, where your energy levels are, and to understand how you're exerting your energy throughout the day. Whether that's stressful energy or like, exercise, physical energy. And so you get to see, oh, okay, well, this interaction took a lot of my energy.
You just wasted 15 of my body battery points. So I'm at a 50 right now. I started at 100. So I know, like, I have 50, if I don't bottom out.
So
anyways,
it's a good tool to have, but it gives you a great visual to see sort of where you're at, and where your energy is going. And then also helps you determine, okay, am I continuing to move through this depleted, deficient state? And from my perspective, right? Like I'm always like with these couple cases, it's like, well, they haven't been feeling well for months. Well, you know, why? Let's put that in context. But if you're compounding that stress and then you're not slowing down to address it, you're gonna keep experiencing more physical symptoms. Because you're not taking time to replete things. Is that the word? But to build. To rebuild.
Basically, you're digging yourself a deeper hole.
Yep. Yeah. It's getting deeper.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think that's helpful for people to see. And hopefully it makes sense to relate how things change after you've experienced a physical stress and you know, in some form or fashion, and if it is compounded because of previous chronic stress that was never addressed. So if nothing else, hopefully this helps motivate folks to address your chronic stress at where you're at, so that you don't, because I mean, we never know, right? Like if there's going to be a physical stressor, if it's not something like a workout or a change in our energy exertion. But I mean, if it is like an accident, if it is an illness or something that, you know, we come down with, or a broken bone, if you're already starting at a deficient state, you're just digging that hole deeper. So cool. Perfect.
All right, anything else?
No.
All right, thank you guys. We'll see you guys next week.